I'm not necessarily seeing the difference between unhealthy coping and behavior adaptation.
I would say the unhealthy coping is a behavior adaptation.
Okay.
So coping would be, let's see if we can do this better. Coping might be using a coloring book. You're not really grounding in safety, but you're distracting yourself. Coping might be playing a video game
Oh,
on your phone. Let's call it that. Let's do
okay.
that.
So the
Unhealthy
difference between
coping.
distraction and numbing out.
I think that's a pretty good way to put it. I can kind of, yeah, I can get on board with that. Let me show you the image that I have here. Okay, so path A would be, let's say we drive up here on this intersection. Stop there. Well, you don't have to stop, I guess, but we're on this intersection, which would be maybe some defensive activation. All right, so in this little spot right here, right before the stop sign, is defensive activation. So maybe you're coming out of shutdown into flight fight activation, or maybe the freeze flight fight activation is attempting to discharge. So there's kind of like a point here where a couple things could happen. One of them is you could listen to your body's needs. So maybe there's an impulse underneath what you're experiencing. Like if you were coming out of shutdown into flight fight and you notice some returning anger or power or fight energy, basically. One option would be that you do a behavioral adaptation like binge eating. So that would take you on this path B. Can you see my mouse pointer?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, good. So it triggers the binge eating or it triggers the defensive state reactivation right here at the stop sign. One option is to go path B, which is binge eating, which takes you right back. Like it kind of feels better. It kind of feels like you're going forward towards self-regulation, but it just takes you right back to the starting point.
Mm.
Okay, so that's a behavioral adaptation. That's how I kind of conceptualize it. Whereas if you instead were to notice that flight fight activation coming back in your system, and you could allow it through the UDS stuff. So if you could allow it, witness it, and experience it, that's the awe method. Then you may notice that there's an impulse underneath the returning sympathetic flight fight stuff. And maybe it's to squeeze or push. And so if you follow that impulse, then that would lead you up the self regulation path, up the A path, up the A road towards self regulation. Okay. So path
Okay.
B mimics path A, but it takes you right back. It kind of feels like when someone binge eats, it kind of feels better in a sense, or it feels like you feel less defensive activation. So it's pseudo self-regulatory. It's kind of like coping, but you just end up right back. And as you do that, as you spiral back, there's going to be thoughts of self-blame and judgment and shame and how could I do this and I knew it, I am worthless, or that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So path B, the behavioral adaptations, those come along with those cognitions that are those more like negative cognitions and feelings of shame and embarrassment, humiliation, that kind of stuff. So path B, it says, but no more, no, it's not mindful. There's no mindfulness there. It's very
Mm-hmm.
reactive. You're just trying to get rid of the feelings. Whereas with path A, there is judgment. I'm sorry, There's not judgment. There is curiosity and there's interest, and that there's from that curiosity, you'll be able to allow the impulse to climb your polyvagal ladder using those very hidden, oftentimes impulses that underlie our emotions and our cognitions.
Yeah, behavior adaptations, it looks like in your diagram, is going in circles.
Yeah, so that would be exactly. So it's just self fulfilling. Is that the right word? It just sets you
Mm-hmm.
right back up for the exact same situation over and over again. So it kind of feels good, but then like you're gonna crash. It kind of feels good. Very much like an addiction, I would say. Very similar.
Would OCD be something like a behavioral adaptation?
I think so. Yeah, I think that comes from specifically a very panicky freeze, flight flavored freeze. But there'll be. I mean, it come from like mild anxiety, but I don't. There's ways to cope with anxiety, but that's not OCD. OCD, I think, comes from really intense, like panic flavored uh, freeze state. That's what I would argue that. Maybe rage. flavor, maybe fight flavored, but I would say definitely panic. Yeah, I'd say more panic, the flight flavor freeze. Yeah,
Could
those the OCD thoughts, like if you're going up that path and that intense freeze panic energy hits, and then the brain says, I need to do something to make this feel better. One of my clients, prayer. She would use really intensive prayer. And she recognized it wasn't just like peaceful praying and connection. It was like, there's something, I have to do this to make myself feel better. And so that was like, she'd feel this activation and her brain would go to all sorts of catastrophic thinking, like death and of her loved ones and whatnot, mom abandoning her. But then the solution in her brain would be pray, 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 like, but it wasn't a calm, meditative, connective experience. It was intense and I have to. So she would do that, which kind of made her feel better, but then she would come right back. That compulsion to do that behavior would come right back to that the stuck state.
could behavior adaptation replace and or get in the way of cognition?
There are cognitions that could be more helpful. Like if someone can actually feel what's happening within them, then there'll be cognitions of what to do with it in a more compassionate way. So if you can allow your defensive activation, your brain might come up with, hey, this would be a really good idea right now. If someone feels fight energy, their brain might say, now's a really good time to do some push-ups or go for a swim or push against the wall or maybe just get a hug. I don't know. So all those cognitions might enter someone's brain, but if they just go back to the behavioral adaptation, then yeah, those cognitions won't come into their brain. Instead, it's going to be, I need a drink to make myself feel better. If that cognition is followed and acted upon, then yeah, all the other ones that might be more helpful as far as self-regulation, all those other ones probably won't pop into their mind, or if they do, it won't be acted upon. You just listened to a segment from one of my Q&A meetups. If you're ready to start working on your self-development or trauma recovery, you can join me in a future one. All you got to do is subscribe to my Total Access membership. Through the membership, you get access to the twice monthly meetups, a whole second podcast, daily growth challenges, and all 3 of my trauma recovery courses. This is your personal invitation, and I cannot wait to see you there.
This podcast is not therapy, not intended to be therapy or be a replacement for therapy. Nothing in this creates or indicates a therapeutic relationship. Please consult with your therapist or seek for one in your area if you are experiencing mental health symptoms. Nothing in this podcast should be construed to be specific life advice. It is for educational and entertainment purposes only. More resources are available in the description of this episode and in the footer of justinlmft.com.